And welcome everyone to another fine episode of the Spoiler Room as we continue our He's Not Loki month here on the Spoiler Room, where we're looking at 4 Tom Hiddleston movies that don't involve him playing the character Loki, even though Loki premiered this past week. That's not what we're talking about tonight. Tonight, we are talking about probably a little known biopic that stars not only Tom Hiddleston, but another MCU alum, Miss Elizabeth Olsen. So thank you for venturing down the stairs, pulling up a chair, and popping your favorite drink to talk movie spoilers with us. And tonight, yes, my right-hand man, the guy who keeps coming back for more, is with us tonight as well. It is none other than the one and only man, myth, the legend, Mr. Ian Simmons. Hello, Ian. How are you?
I'm doing well. I would say out there, enjoy this space while you can, because if my internet freezes up
like that, as if on cue.
It's funny, Mark. The moment I said, if anything happens to my internet, I'm going to turn off my camera. Then it happens, of course. So let's try this. Let's see if this works. Hey, how's that? Yay.
Hey, well, you're good so far. So,
yeah. Otherwise, I'm doing fine.
Well, that's good. That's good. That's good. Glad to hear it. And tonight, yes, we are looking at a 2015 film starring, as I mentioned, not only Tom Hiddleston and Elizabeth Olsen, but a number of other recognizable faces, including Bradley Whitford. And it's basically the biopic of Hank Williams Sr., his short, his fiery but short-lived career, unfortunately, due to his untimely death. And it basically gives the story of his basically more of his personal life, I think. Ian, you got a synopsis for us for I Saw the Light?
Yeah, I'm going to go back to Dennis Leary and his No Cure for Cancer album.
Oh,
where he says, "We need a 2.5-hour movie about the Doors, folks. No, we don't. I can sum it up for you in 5 seconds. I'm drunk. I'm nobody. I'm drunk. I'm famous. I'm drunk. I'm fucking dead. There's your movie."
Wow. But how do you truly feel? So appropriately tonight, I also brought some alcohol-infused chocolate, Jack Daniel's Tennessee Honey Whiskey.
Oh, I thought those were going to be Jack Daniel's cigarettes.
No, I don't smoke cigarettes, but it's chocolate infused with Jack Daniel's Honey Whiskey. Yeah, I thought it was appropriate to have one tonight as we talk about this film.
So, have you had one yet, or is this the first time?
No, I've had one before. So this isn't my first time.
Is it as delicious as it sounds?
Ooh. It is, considering it's literally a shot of, pardon my chewing, folks, it's literally a shot of a small shot of alcohol within, instead of a candy nougat in a chocolate square, it's alcohol.
Oh, wow. Okay. I thought it was just like blended into the chocolate, but there's actually a shot of booze in there. Wow.
It's actually liquid in the middle. So, and now this might help me see the light. Anyway. So here we are, 2015. They make a picture about one of the more famous country western singers, I dare say, of all time, with two folks who obviously part of the casting, I would suspect, is because of the MCU, because this by now Age of Ultron had come out, so we'd seen some of both Elizabeth Olsen and Loki. And so I suspect that was part of the motivation behind the casting. But it sounds like you didn't care for this film, Ian. What was your initial reaction?
It's weird because I watched it today. And it was the second time I'd seen it. The first time I saw it was in 2015. It's weird because I think Annie Banks might have been at the same screening, if I have this right.
Really?
Because I could have sworn that she had a story about like approaching or trying to approach Tom Hiddleston after a screening in Chicago.
Oh yeah, that's right. Yeah,
because he came to the preview screening of this movie. And
Mhm.
I invited a friend of mine, Charlie, who's a huge like country and Hank Williams fan. And like,
Sure.
oh, what do you think of this? I have no concept of Hank Williams. I think I know a
Mhm.
couple of his songs, but we actually did a podcast about it like the next day. I remember very little about it. I also don't remember being this bored the second time or the first time around. Possibly because of the anticipation, possibly because of the newness and seeing these actors that I'm familiar with in one context doing something completely different. But yeah, like I I think I engaged with this movie in the last like 20 minutes.
Mhm.
But the rest of it is just like it's very jumpy. It goes from like one year to the next and jumps ahead a couple of years. And it just seems to be a pattern, which is, I guess, kind of the point. He was an alcoholic, he was a womanizer. There's a really funny line where he says, no, every woman in my life has kids.
Yeah.
And that's wow. So yeah, I think the performances are solid. I think the direction is fine. It just feels like this is the 80th version of this story and of this movie. Not specifically Hank Williams, but like the biopic, as you mentioned. And I'm like, what's the newness?
But biopics are always tough. It's not a genre of film I seek out specifically, but again, for this month, and the whole point of this show is for me to possibly broaden my horizons and try
Mm,
to pick some films that were either on my list or sounded interesting to me, even if they aren't in my normal wheelhouse. And I fully admit I watched this for the cast.
mhm.
And the fact that I grew up on Hank Williams Jr. and Senior. I grew up on old school country. It's not my favorite genre. I really don't care for new country. If I do listen to country, which isn't often, it's old school. It's Johnny Cash, Waylon Jennings, George, the George Jones, the classic type stuff, and Hank Williams. I like Hank Williams Senior stuff, especially the older stuff because it's also very bluesy. The
Mhm.
older stuff was because it's roots are kind of they pull a lot of songs from the southern blues scene. So I like the older stuff. So I enjoyed uh the biopic well enough. I mostly for the performances. It's it's really tough to get your head wrapped around Tom Hiddleston with a southern drawl singing Hank Williams songs because that's him singing. Oh,
Yeah.
it took me a little bit to get my head wrapped around it because I'm like, part of the reason I wanted to do this series is like, no, no, that's not his voice at all.
Well, let me ask you, as a Hank Williams fan, what did you make of his take on the music?
I thought he did a very I thought he did a good job. He did a good job in catching some of the nuances of his song, but at the same time he wasn't trying to completely sound exactly like him. So it was more of like some of the inflections and stuff and the way he sang them. He was pretty spot on. I mean, for someone to try to get that style of singing, which was hard to do with the type of vocals that Hank Williams Sr. did, I thought he did fine. I thought I always like the fact when they actually have the actors sing, even if it doesn't quite sound like it. They did it in Rocket Man.
Mhm.
Um, that was him actually singing there. And I like that. And then also in Bohemian Rhapsody. So I like that because at least it matches more the performer. So even if it might not exactly fully replicate the person they're playing, it at least matches the visuals to where you're like, okay, this person isn't just lip syncing.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, yeah, I thought the songs were good. I mean, there's a lot of them in this movie, but I don't know, at a certain point, I just kind of wished that they had made a straightforward documentary, um,
Right.
because there's certain tropes, like, towards the middle of the movie, I guess, he shows up and Elizabeth Olsen, her character's name is Audrey, his first wife, I guess, or at
Yeah.
least
His
his
first
main
wife. Yep.
squeeze, yep.
Mhm.
She's in the hospital and he swings by, and I'm like, "Oh, this is where," even when I first saw this and I had no context for their relationship, really, I'm like, "Oh,
Mhm.
this is the part where she says, "I had an abortion because I can't stand you." And sure enough,
Yeah. I mean, now granted, it does reflect real life. She did actually, his wife. That's the thing. It's based off of the biography of Hank Williams, and they do hit. I was doing some research after the movie. They do hit the main points and keep things fairly accurate. Um, but it
right.
is handled, like you said, it's handled very by the numbers. So I didn't mind the movie when I watched it. I was engaged mostly because of the performances. But if you talk about the movie as a whole, it is a standard biopic, except for the fact that it never really paints its main subject in a really good light ever. I,
Yeah. Well, and and there's kind of hints of it because he's got like this weird relationship with his mom. But I mean, I think about the scene I think most about the abortion scene is there's a similar one in Godfather or Godfather 2
right.
where
Yeah.
Kay tells Michael that she did the same thing and
Mhm.
he like blows up on her and it becomes this like really emotional physical thing and there's a lot going on in that scene. In this one, like the performances are good, but the characters as written are so kind of flat and somber and almost afraid to emote that I'm like, I'm falling asleep here.
Yeah, it's it's interesting. I mean, that's why I was engaged for most of it was the performance. I was just enjoying the performances and the fact that our it shows you how good all of the talent is, even in the minor roles. They make the most out of what is are very basically written characters in a
Yeah, like
basic biopic.
yeah, you could eat one of those Jack Daniels candies for every time Audrey says, Hank Williams, you son of a bitch. I'm like, oh God, you'll be plastered before you get to the third one.
Yeah, and that's the only trouble with it. Now, I don't think it deserves the 19% that it got on Rotten Tomatoes. Um, eh, and mainly, like I said, that's for the production. They captured the era, I think, fairly well. Um, some of the things that it is missing, though, some of those biopic, as much as it's a by the numbers, it's still missing some of those other biopic options, like historical context
Mm-hmm.
for other events happening. Because even in most biopics, especially set during this period of time, you also get references of other events, like major historical events happening around the world, or at least in the US, that, uh, and then you go back to your main subject or whatever. And here we don't really get that. We just stay with Audrey and Hank, and we watch how Hank just keeps making mistake after mistake, and we do see the talent through the songs. But at the same time, you don't. While there's a lot of songs, you don't get as much song performances as you might expect. If that's not make any sense. Um,
Well, yeah, I mean, it's also, I mean, it opens in, I think, 1944.
I think
Yeah,
so, or
around
40,
there.
45, something like that. Yeah.
It was at least 44. I can't remember if it was
Yeah.
earlier than that, but I mean, you're talking
Yeah.
about World War II in
Mhm.
America. I mean, it's almost as if there was no greater conflict than anything happening in Hank Williams' own life. Like,
Right.
it'd be interesting to find out, what are the what is it takes place in Alabama and Nashville, Tennessee, and all that stuff. What are the attitudes of these folks towards World War II? They all seem to
Right.
be completely obsessed with country music and the Grand Old Opry. I don't know.
Well, the Grand Ole
There's
Opry was a big deal, so
no,
it
but I mean, so is American Idol, but it went off the air when 9/11 happened. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's just it's kind of I don't know. It just seemed very very much centered on its own story, and it's to your point, like there's no sense of the greater context and how did that affect the characters. I don't know. I after spending 2 hours and 2 minutes watching a movie about Hank Williams, I still don't know anything about him except that he had a drinking problem and he loved to whore around, and he
yeah,
had a great voice.
and he had a great voice, and his wife not so much. Um,
Mm-mm.
yeah, there's a lot of potential for this for being a really solid thing. I think this is a proof of a film that when you hear people talk about and you wonder, and I'm bringing it to modern age too, pardon me for interjecting it in here, but
Mm.
people wonder why writers are so important. uh because any film, no matter how much talent and production design and everything that you have, you need to have a solid backbone, which is the script or the story. And this one, unfortunately, is missing that in many aspects, to where there was opportunity to explore things a little bit more than Hank Williams' faults. Now I know he had a very shorter career due to his passing, and you do find, and they briefly touch on it, why he passed because of his alcoholism. He got treatment from a quack of a doctor who later would go to jail for I think he killed someone. I forgot who. I was doing some research on it, but that is almost riveting, and that only gets like a very like brief mention. It's like the stuff that would probably be meatier to explore, we breeze by.
Well, and also, um, at the very end when they're showing like archival footage, I guess, of his funeral,
Yeah.
there's a voiceover that says, he died at age 29, and
Mhm.
in 6 years he had 36 hit songs and sold 11 million records. Where is any of that in the movie? You
It's
hear about the
mentioned. It's
no,
mentioned,
no,
but
but I mean, you hear about occasionally, oh, this song went to number one, or we sold like 11,000 records last week, or something like that. But where is the really living high on the hog? Like, you see him traveling around a lot. Their house isn't really anything extravagant or to write home about. I'm just looking for, like, what did they do with that money? What did that do to his relationships? How did the money, facilitate his, make his personal character flaws even bigger? It's so vignette that you could take any scene pretty much from any part of this movie and swap it with any other scene and wouldn't seem out of place because they're all the same. There's not really a progression.
yeah, and that's the thing, is this feels like an outline to an actual biopic.
Yes.
And
Yes.
this feels like they have all the points they want to hit at the film, but they don't really have the stuff to help you get from point A to point B. So we just jump from this point to this point, and then we'll mention in a little bit of exposition or whatever to try to figure out, here's what's happening. Now, maybe they're trying to tell the story from just Hank Williams' point of view, but there too, it just, and I'm wondering if it's a budget limitation or what, because I'm watching this and like I said, I'm like, this should be a lot better than it is. While I still did like the film, and I did need a palate cleanser afterwards because it was the depressing ending.
Wait,
I
what was your
ended
palate
it.
cleanser? Did you watch Loki?
No, I didn't watch Loki. I first watched a horror film, comedy horror called Dead Detectives from Shudder. Well, I pulled it from the family video shelf, so I'm trying to watch some of these films that I have on the shelf here that I haven't. So I just pick a random horror film off of there. So I watched Dead Detectives, and that was okay. And then I watched right after that a film called Dead Ant, which was actually quite funny and highly entertaining and got me in a better mood after watching this. And I wasn't in a bad mood because of the quality of this film. I was just in not the best mood because this is a bleak biopic. Even with the musical performances they have, the context of the musical performances that he's making always have some tragedy or some drama that builds up to it, that you know the context of him singing is completely different than what it should be.
Yeah. Um, and I don't know. They're like towards the end. There's that bit of comedy where he's got like 2 girls, Billy and Bobby. They're both, the one he
Oh, that
wants to
show up
marry,
at
and
the house. Yeah,
the other's like his kind of road mistress or whatever.
yeah,
And then I think the best scene in the movie is when Bobby and Hank are sitting out on that dock, and she's just found out
yes,
that she's pregnant, and she's like, "We should get married." And he's like, I don't want to marry you. I love you, but I want to marry
Yeah,
Billy. And was like, oh, this hurts so bad because you can just see everything that's going through that actress's head about like, well, the guy just poured my heart out to, doesn't want me, and I'm pregnant, and it's 1952 or whatever, or 51.
right.
It hurts so bad.
50,
It was, yeah, it
54
would have been,
or
I think
53
he
to be.
he he died in 53 on New Year's, so this has been 52 right before
You're
that.
right. Yeah, yeah, right
Yeah.
before he passed, basically. And that person that she did have the child, and that ended up being a Jet Williams, who finally, after his passing, had to go to legal court to actually be acknowledged as a offspring of Williams.
Mm.
So I read up on that because I was like, "What?" And then like, because you all hear about Hank Williams Jr., who was Cephas, who they shows up as a kid. He doesn't show up as Hank Williams Jr. Hi, I'm older Hank. No, it's just the kid version of him. But still, they do cover that part kind of, and um, yeah, it's again there. I'm I don't know if it's budget limitations or what that they had or time limitations, but there is actually a really solid biopic somewhere in here. It's just unfortunately it never quite gets there.
Yeah, and
You
I
know.
think that's the thing, is like the script is the cheapest thing to to create.
Mhm.
Because you mentioned, I mean, the looks period, the costuming, the sets, the cars, oh, the cars.
Oh, the
Everything is
cars are gorgeous. Yeah.
Yeah, everything is great, but, without what's written down on the paper. Like, my second favorite scene is when he shows up to that one event and he's, like, kind of stoned off his ass, and
Yeah.
he starts, like, he's not singing, he's almost, like, doing, like, spoken
Poetry.
word, yeah,
Yeah.
into the microphone and, like, freaking everybody out. That was great, but again, I don't know what this means. Like,
Well,
what did this mean to his career? What was the significance of that thing he was singing? Did they know? Was this a song that he was refusing to sing but just speak? I have no idea why that scene was important, other than that he screwed up an engagement that he was supposed to be at.
well, it showed up one of the many engagements he ended up screwing up, and it showed that his drug problem was pretty severe because he kept missing his dates, and they do allude to the fact that he had tried to do some songs under a pseudonym, and
Mhm.
that's the pseudonym he kind of introduces at this event where he's coked off of his ass. Um, and again, this is a classic example of where this film could go from just biopic to wow biopic, is to at least complete that whole scene. We see him very awkward. I mean, it's an awkward feeling scene. He gets up there, you're just feeling awkward for everybody involved, him, his band members, everything. The way it's handled is great. But just as he finishes this monologue, we just cut away. And
Mhm.
then he's fine again in a car, and his wife's like, "Oh, I heard I heard about the trouble you had in Texas or whatever." I'm like, but we don't see much of the audience's reaction after he finishes. We don't know if he finished that set, if he just went up, did the one monologue, and then walked off. Uh, and that's what you have. You have a lot of incomplete scenes in this film.
Or if they
If
ate it up, because as you mentioned, he recorded music as this person, or as this alter ego. You don't
right.
tend to usually do that if, nobody responds to it or buys the records. At least I wouldn't think that'd be the case.
Well,
Um,
Bradley Whitford's character, who's playing the longtime friend and man, well, not long time, but a friend and manager of Hank Williams, Fred Rose, he talks about the reason he did it and how it wasn't warmly received, but it was like it seemed more genuine of Hank. And then we get this scene later on where the cops basically yell at Hank Williams for being late to this event, and then he totally just borks the event, doing what is alluded to as being a piece that he normally did under his pseudonym. Um, and that's what I pieced together myself. That's not necessarily laid out in the film. That's just what I pieced together watching it myself. That's what I think they were trying to go for here. Um, but yeah, uh it's really a weird mixed bag because watching this, I enjoyed a lot of things about the movie, but I'm just like, I wish this story was more compelling.
And this is something I want to kind of ask you about because
Yeah.
I feel like we're kind of over 2 on Mr. Hiddleston's non-Loki career. We talked about High Rise last week,
Mhm.
and now we're talking about this movie. You know, there are elements that really work in both movies, but they're not really things that suggest, oh, well, he doesn't need this Marvel stuff. He's got a lot of great other things going on.
And that's the thing is his performance is fun. I love his performance. I really
Hmm.
enjoy, he puts in a sympathetic performance. It doesn't take you long to not see Tom Hiddleston anymore. He
Right.
may not fully look like Hank Williams, but you believe that he is Hank Williams. He is this character, Hank Williams, in this film. You're not seeing Tom Hiddleston. You're not seeing Loki play someone. He's Hank Williams here. Okay, it didn't take long at all to really sway me in that, and that's because of his performance. He goes all in on this, including, like I said, singing. I found the parts early on in his career that they covered with him and the radio station and him showing up late and him building his relationship with Audrey. That first part there, I enjoyed. I enjoyed quite a bit. As we get further in his career, though, we don't cover a lot of his career. It's like they tried not to, almost. Like they're trying to keep it on him and not even bring in anything that he was doing positively into the story.
Yeah. uh, in the same way, it's on the one hand, it is like every other biopic we've ever seen. But on the other hand, it leaves out a lot of the stuff that we kind of need from those biopics, like the fame and the accolades and the adoring fans. Like he goes to Hollywood and he has this executive meeting, and there's this really weird exchange with the studio head about like wanting to see him without his hat and like without his clothes. And he's like, "Do you have a full head of hair?" And he's like, "Yeah, I got a bunch of it in a drawer." I'm like, "What are we talking about here?" And then it cuts.
Yeah.
I didn't know if he was talking about hair. It was like hair starts with an H and so does heroin. I have no idea if it's speaking in code, but it was just such a bizarre exchange. I'm like, I need more of this. Where's this movie?
Yeah, I did too. I You mentioned your favorite one of your favorite scenes was on the porch. One
On
of
the
my
dock.
f-
Yeah.
On the dock, excuse me, on the dock there with his road girlfriend that he occasionally visits. That was a wonderful scene. It felt genuine, and it's the most probably the best directed, one of the best directed scenes. The other best directed scene that I really enjoyed was where this is later in his career that the alcoholism he's getting his treatment, quote unquote, his treatment, which was we found out later all this guy was doing who bought his doctor degree for $25 was treating alcoholism with a huge animal tranquilizer is all it was. And it basically, if you had a heart condition, could kill you. And that's spoiler what ended up killing him. um but there's this wonderful scene where he's in a recording booth. It's like after a recording session, he's just sitting on the couch, strumming his guitar a bit, and Fred Rose is there, Bradley Whitford, and he's like, we can be done for the day, and he's like, no, no, I got one more song, and he starts singing "Your Cheating Heart,"
Hmm.
and that scene, that I loved that scene. I'm like, wow, because he's singing "Your Cheating Heart" at first. You're like, oh, okay. And the thing is, it's mic'd, so he's actually singing it on screen. This isn't like a pre-recording that he's lip syncing to that he sang earlier and then they're playing it back. He's actually singing it right now in this scene. So I think that's what also brings some genuine honesty to the scene. But halfway through him singing "Your Cheating Heart," they cut to his second wife is sitting there while he's singing "Your Cheating Heart" and looking at her.
Yeah, I mean it's because they're it's not a cut. It's the cameras pulls back
Mm-hmm.
from the couch, and you
That's right.
realize that
Sorry.
she's standing in
Yeah.
the doorway, and we don't know how long she's been standing there. We
Right.
don't see her. It's not like she walks in and there's like big moment of like, oh my god, he's singing this
Mm-hmm.
song. She could have been the entire time. She could have been there like just as we see her. But
Right.
yeah, it's great because
It,
you know that she knows that he's a philanderer,
mhm.
but she's probably wondering wait, why are you writing this song now about all this, all this cheating
Mhm.
that you're doing? Like, what kind of guilt are you still harboring? And it just goes to the fact that none of the women in his life can trust him, but half of
Right.
them don't seem to care.
Yeah, and so I really enjoyed that scene as well. That was it's one of the few scenes where it just that's the type of stuff you're looking for a film like this. You're like, that's what I want right there because he told a lot with very little and used one of his famous songs to do it. I'm like, that's how you do that. And then later on, we kind of blow through him getting kicked off of the Grand Old Opry, and we see his reaction later. Tom Hiddleston just acts the shit out of this on the steps as he starts to cry and break down, realizing his dream is gone. But that's just blown through that whole sequence.
Well, especially because there's the scene before, that with JD, the representative of the Grand Ole Opry, shows
Yeah.
up to his house and says, "Look, you missed this gig. This can't happen again. You've got 2 more shows coming up, one on August 9th and August 10th. You better be there." And Hiddleston or Hank Williams is like, "Yes, sir." And then we cut to the shot of, the Opry and, like, the red, like, the names
Mhm.
crossed out and all that stuff, and JD's, like, looking at his watch, and then you realize you cut again, and it's August 11th, and
Mhm.
JD's talking to somebody. He's like, "Yeah, I had to let Hank go." And then you see Hiddleston sitting on his porch, like, yeah, like you said, crying. I'm like, "What was he doing for those 2 days?" Like,
Uh-huh.
it's almost like it would have been really interesting if for some reason he felt compelled to blow off the gigs because he was being told that he had to be there, like his level of self-destruction was that profound, or was he just, boozed and coked up out of his mind? We don't know. We don't know what happened to prevent him from being there because it's such a quick cut from, "Yes, sir, I'll be there," to literally a minute later, "Oh man, why didn't I go?" Like, I don't know why you didn't go.
And the thing is, you needed. I don't mind not having my hand held, but at the same time, for a film like this, you need to show at least some of the even a brief like him passed out and someone ringing the phone,
Mm.
you know. Like you have the scene where you have to be at these shows. He's like, "All right, I'll be there." Then you go to, the paper with the red marked that he's not there. Say have a phone ringing and he's passed out and he never answers the phone. And then you have the guy hang up and talks about how he had to let, Hank go. And then we cut to Hiddleston crying on the steps. Just a brief scene to show why he didn't show up. Yes, we figure it's because of the alcohol, because he's suffering from alcoholism. We figure that's it, but we're not exactly told that. So it's hard. It's harder to say what his motivation was for blowing off what is his dream gig.
Or, I don't want to find out that Hank Williams got fired by JD telling someone, "Yeah, I let him go." I wanna see that phone call.
Yeah,
What it's like, or
yeah.
or I wanna see, did he drive out to see him or whatever again and have that what was Hank Williams' reaction, to your point, to losing his dream? This something that was easily avoidable. Yeah, I
Well, and it's a number of things. Is that there's things that he could have done that were easily avoidable. That Well, yes, we established fairly early on that he is an alcoholic. You still kind of need a little bit of that breadcrumb of info of some kind in this. Maybe he was out too late with a woman and that's why he missed the gig, or he wakes up in a strange area. I understand they were trying to kind of keep it fairly accurate, but it just feels like there's chunks of this movie missing.
Right, and I would imagine that in a documentary, assuming this movie follows closely to the historical record, the documentarians would have let us know why he missed those gigs or what he was doing, or there would have been some other accounts of what it was like at the Opry when he didn't show up for those 2 gigs. Like other people, I think they were 2 separate locations or something. But
Yeah.
does word get out? Like, are the people on the ninth going to tell is the word going to spread so the people in the tent are concerned that he's not going to show up? Are they pissed, or do they even care at that point? Like I think you said earlier, Hank Williams is not a likable guy. There's no real like redeeming qualities in the film. I think that's part of it, is this path of self-destruction is so consistent and so unstoppable that at a certain point I just became numb to it. I'm like, he's going to screw this up. He's not really going to care. He's going to screw this person over. He's not really going to care. All these people still love him. I have no idea why. Like, the only thing that I can think of that makes him a redeeming character is that winning smile and that showmanship whenever he's performing. And it also made me think about like celebrity, because if this guy was just fucked up like the second he gets off the stage and such a bad egg, like you see him up there performing for people, you would have no idea that he had any troubles unless you happen to catch him on one of the shows where he's bombed out of his mind. But like the Opry stuff, like even later in the film when he's up there with his family and everything and comes out and he's singing, like I know what is going on with him and Audrey, but the audience doesn't really.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's the thing. And this no surprise to anyone. This was a bomb when it came out. It was a $13 million film, and it made 1.8 million.
Those are almost Expendables 4 numbers, Mark.
That's almost Expendables 4 numbers. Not quite. But and I think it's because of these weaknesses. You've got the big name stars in here, carried over from their popularity of the MCU, telling the story about a big named star that's very famous. Even those who might not be familiar with country western music know the name Hank Williams, right? If anything, through his son, if nothing else. Mm-hmm. So I mean, there's all those elements in here to make this story interesting. And it's like, I guess they interviewed the director and he said he wanted to try to keep the focus on the fiery nature of the relationship between Hank and Audrey. I'm like, well, then call it Hank and Audrey. It's, and even then, maybe it was because it was only shot for 13 million. And I imagine part of that was the price tag of Olsen and Hiddleston. And even Whitford to some degree, maybe.
Yeah, I mean, they might have agreed to like points off the back of it or something. Because I mean, if they're doing anything near what they're worth, those three alone would eat up that 13 mil.
Right, and so all of it's there, but that script wasn't. And to your point, what you were talking about with people, maybe filling in the gaps, even with some interview or a character playing a real life person to give their perspective, like they're being interviewed. If anything, cut back again to Fred Rose, Bradley Whitford, and fill in the gaps. Like the event with what happened after the concert in Texas. Maybe talk to him a bit more of the fallout. If you're not going to show it, give us at least some of that filler. Have somebody fill in some of those blanks, rather than just go, oh yeah, we mentioned it. He had trouble in Texas. Well,
yeah. Well, there's another pretty good scene with David Krumholtz playing a journalist named Dolan,
yes,
who gets a brief interview with Hank, and it doesn't go well. But it's there that you really get the sense for what the journalism and media landscape, such as it was like back in the early 1950s, because Dolan's asking some pointed questions, and Hank's like, what are you getting at? And it's like, well, some people say that you might have a drinking problem. Like, wow. So it really is a contrast to today, where everyone's got a phone, everyone's got a blog, or like everyone's a whistleblower or something like that. Back then, this guy's personal life was a complete wreck, but there were only rumors that he had, a drinking problem. He could get away with saying, oh, towards the end of the movie, he really did hurt his back, but he had canceled other shows with excuses of like, oh, I fell down, or I need to do some, just need some rest, not feeling well. So when this journalist is trying to bring the truth out of him, he gets, really understandably prickly, because the truth may just, come out.
Yeah, well, he had spinal bifida, so that was his condition that he actually had a condition that he had surgery for.
But I mean,
So
he discovered it, much
right
later in
later,
life,
yeah,
right? So
much
yeah,
later in life, right? Yeah.
as such, well,
Um,
such as it is. I mean, he didn't even make it out of his
see,
20s.
see, and that's there was another opportunity there that's briefly alluded to, but they never do anything with it. When he and his buddies show up, they're country singers, and they're not exactly well received. They go to the building where they're supposed to be let in because he's doing a show there, and the doorman doesn't barely open the door for him. And when he does, he's kind of disgusted. Then when they're in the lounge, they're not exactly treated nice by the waitress
Hmm.
either. And it's what I realized. It's like we're talking at this point in the film, 51 or 2, 51, I think it was. Uh, I realized, yeah, the reputation that rock and roll stars would have later on was initially country western stars.
Mm.
The drug use, the womanizing, the alcohol, a lot of that I think was far more associated, at least at that period of time, with the country western singers, and that it was maybe with the which we don't get any perspective of any other artist in the world either. He
Well,
doesn't cross paths or anything.
well, I mean, that's even a great angle to take with a movie because you think of country western, you think of like the South, kind of down home country, Southern values, right? Such as they are,
Right. Yeah.
or such as they're perceived to be. You wouldn't think of this like hard driving rock and roll lifestyle in the world of country music. And maybe
Right.
he was an anomaly, but you're right. Show some other acts, some other artists that are like on the circuit with him and they're like kind of horrified reaction at what, at what they're
Hmm.
seeing, or maybe they're partaking too. I don't know. We see these random parties with like groupies and hangers on, but I don't know who any of these people are. Are they part of the circuit? Are they just townies that went to the show? I don't know.
It felt like they were just supposed to be like townies or folks he knew.
Mhm.
And again, I guess this falls into how entertaining is reality. Uh, because if they were really trying to go for a realistic portrayal of some things and just touch on these parts, um, well, as you mentioned, in the context of a documentary, maybe that will be interesting. But in part of a biopic, you kind of expect some things to maybe be embellished a little or explored or enhanced or something. I mean, even the Elvis one, and Elvis, talk about drugs and women and such in that rock and roll lifestyle. But the Elvis biopic had more going on, uh, and not just Tom Hanks trying to be something no one's used to him being. That script was even, and now granted, it had Baz Luhrmann's visual style to play with as well, but still, you could follow the history of your character far better in that film than in this one.
And it's I'm kicking myself because I watched Elvis like I think on an award season screener,
Mhm.
6 months or 5 months after it had come out because
Right,
I saw the trailer for it and then it's Baz Luhrmann who I'm kind of hit and miss. I'm like,
right,
it's also another musical biopic. Like, I
right.
don't know if I want to see this. But when I did watch it, I'm like, this is great. Yeah, the performances are all wonderful. I think to
Mhm,
your point, yeah, a lot of the visuals maybe help to gloss over the fact that a lot of what we were seeing was kind of conventional, but I really got the sense of who Elvis Presley was from like a kid, his
mhm.
kind of blues influences, and he got a bad rap for like appropriating a bunch of black music, which is not exactly the case,
Right.
because it's more like he grew up playing
With
what
it,
he
yeah.
with it, because
Mhm,
those are the neighborhoods and the
mhm.
people he grew up around. I wanted to see more of that with Hank Williams. Did they talk about his dad? I can't remember like
They
what.
briefly mention his dad. He says his dad wasn't around much, but he briefly mentions there's one scene that kind of talks about his dad.
Right, and he's got this strange relationship with his mother. Like, I want to dig into that. Like, even at the end, when he's saying goodbye to his fiance or whatever,
His
in the
wife.
car,
It was his wife, his
were they
second
married
wife.
by
Yeah,
then?
yeah, they were married by then. Yeah.
Okay. He just kind of gives like a salute to his mom as he's
Yeah.
pulling away. I'm like, what is that? Oh.
Yeah. And that's the thing. And the reason I brought up Elvis is because if there's anything kind of a parallel between Hank Williams Sr. and Elvis as far as lifestyle and career and everything, it's kind of similar as far as their younger life goes. But the way that was presented, you're right. You get insight, and it didn't pull punches. The Elvis biopic didn't exactly pull punches with its main character. And here too, I'm all for them not pulling punches, but at the same time, show a couple other sides of Hank besides just his flaws. It was like this was totally focused on all of his flaws. And yes, occasional musical number to show his talent, but we briefly get a scene to where he's trying to be a good dad, talking to his son on the phone and then Audrey just kind of shuts that shit down. Um, it almost paints Audrey in even a worse light than Hank
Well,
in some respects. But
I mean, maybe, but I mean, at that point, she's so fed up with his
right.
nonsense that she probably wants the Bocephus. Oh God,
Hank William
Hank.
Jr.
Yeah,
Jr.
they keep referring to him as by his birth name. Like, no, that is, I don't know where that name
That's
came
Hank Williams
from.
Jr. Yeah.
Yeah, but it needs to be retired because
Yeah.
that's an atrocious name. But it's almost like she wants to keep the son away from the dad because she's afraid of
Right.
what that influence might be.
Yeah, and I get that as well. But even before that, like when we first meet her and that, and how she's very, she's very take charge and a bit demanding in that. It doesn't exactly, as the director said, trying to paint their fiery relationship. At the same time, it's not putting either one of these characters really. Although you do feel more sympathy for Audrey because of William's behavior, but still, it doesn't exactly give you a portrait of either person you really want to get behind.
Well, I mean, on top of it, like when we first meet them, she left her husband right with their daughter to be with Hank Williams. So I'm like,
Right.
all right, what are you expecting here?
Within 10 days. It was just 10 days. The ink was just fresh on her divorce papers when we
Hmm.
first see Audrey and Hank getting married. Um,
Right, and then we see a little bit of that later with the
mhm.
keep getting mixed up. The Billy character,
The Billy character,
that
yeah.
he's like singing to her during one of the Opry shows, and then afterward he's like putting the moves on her, and she's like, "Oh, I'm here with this other guy," and he's like, "You gonna marry this girl?" He's like, "Probably not." He's like, "Well, then you won't mind if I step in." I'm like, oh my
Right?
god.
Like, oh damn. Like, wow. All right then.
And then the
You
guy's
go,
like, "Yeah,
man.
you can have her." I'm like, oh, okay.
Yeah. So yeah, I don't know. It's there's potential here. It never quite gets to that level that you would hope with as much going for this film. It still flopped, and you can see why, because it has no spine. If that's if I'm being appropriate.
No, because he had spina bifida, Mark.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, I set it up and you served it. Good job. Good job. Good job. Uh, yeah, I saw the light, folks. If you want to see some decent performances by some folks who aren't in spandex and still see their talent shine, and you can check out I Saw the Light. I'm not sure. Would you be able to recommend this?
I recommend, yes, because it's something different from these actors. If you're watching it wondering, I mean, Elizabeth Olsen has been great in other movies,
Right. Mhm.
and Tom Hiddleston, I think, has been great in other not so great movies. Um, but I think there are a few scenes. There's the dock scene.
Mhm.
There's the outdoor kind of spoken
Right.
word scene, and then there's the my God, the one on the couch that we talked about.
Right, the
You
cheating
can
heart. Yes.
Cheating Heart, right? Those are you can almost see like those playing at the Oscars during Tom Hiddleston's alternate universe nomination because
Right.
he's really going for it, but they're also really good. It's just that the rest of the movie, the other hour and 45 minutes, doesn't quite match up to those three scenes.
Yeah. It has some of those elements that we've seen in other biopics, but it's missing a lot that it needed to really make it something special. But now that we've talked about him, and he's not Loki. Do you like him in this role better than you like him in the role of Loki? That's what we're
Oh,
gonna vote on. So
that's another tough one. I'm going to say yes.
Mm.
Because it's something it is different, and he's got a hell of a voice, and he really goes for it. Yeah.
And I gotta say as well, I like him in this role better than the Loki role because all those reasons. It surprised me that he sang himself, and it surprised me as well he was able to be so into this character that you do forget this is the guy with the strong British accent and played Loki. If you don't see Hank Williams, you at least see a country western singer, and
Well,
that's because of his performance.
right, if you look up pictures of Hank Williams, they don't look
You do
that
no.
dissimilar. They both have that weird, like, pointed lips,
Mhm.
mouth kinda thing, almost like the Grinch. Um, Speaking of being into things, I'm pretty sure this was around the same time that he was dating Taylor Swift. But anyway, sorry.
It could have been. It could have been, yes. So, of course, he had to bring that up. Yeah, because her film's coming up. So
Of course.
there you have it. Nothing says Halloween like a Taylor Swift movie at the theater. And with that, I think we're going to close it out for the night. We've had a lot of people on our stream. Thank you so much for those who have been tuning in. No comments, but they've been watching. Hope you enjoyed this. And I will agree. Tom was great. And it's two movies so far that while the script wasn't exactly the best, his performance was top notch, and apparently he really wowed the cast and crew. He would play the piano at the end of every night they rapped
Oh.
for the night. He would play them songs in that on a piano. So, and he would thank everybody in the crew, including the janitors, apparently. So, there's really cool stories about him and the behind the scenes stuff that I was looking up online about, giving you an idea of what type of individual Tom Hiddleston was, and very appreciative of this role. And yeah, it's just a shame we don't have a better script to what could have been a really solid biopic in I Saw the Light. So thank you so much. Yeah, you had any final thoughts?
I just want to say I like it when I hear those stories about, people living up to what you hope they
Mhm.
would be in real life. But I also just saw something. I think I want to see a poster where Tom Hiddleston is made up to look like Billy the Puppet, and it would be called I Saw the
Oh.
Light. What do you think?
Would you like to play a game? It's just
Your
ah,
cheating heart is
hurt.
lying on the floor.
How could you see? Do you want to see the light, or do you want to pay for your sins? In 3 minutes, these spikes will poke into your eyes. Unless, yeah, there you go. There you go. I saw the light. That's the next. That's the next installment in the Saw series. There you go. Tom Hiddleston is the voice of the puppet. All right. And
Yeah.
with that, folks, we will say a good night. But this is always the point where I give my crew member the license to shill. So please, Ian, let folks know what's coming up for you and your website and such.
Well, I'm Ian Simmons. I run Kicking the Seat, which you can find at kickseat.com and on YouTube if you look up Kicking the Seat. And this Wednesday, assuming I have stable working internet, you'll be able to see me live talking about two films on a panel. We're going to be doing a new series or a newer series called If You Like, You'll Love. We're maintaining this week. If you like the creator, you'll love Ex Machina. So doing that pairing, that should be a lot of fun. And yeah, that's pretty much it. 8 o'clock Central on Wednesday night.
Fantastic. And time's gotten away from me. I meant to do a review of The Creator, but I have not yet. I didn't know if I would still do the movie minute because it's been a little week and a day since I've seen it. So, but we'll see what happens. I might still drop that. We got the Sawdust City Fright Fest coming up Friday and Saturday this week in beautiful Oshkosh, Wisconsin, at the Historic Time Community Theater. Sawdust City Fright Fest. We're playing some indie horror. We play an indie horror short before their showing of Friday the 13th Part 2 Friday night, because it's Friday the 13th. And then all day Saturday from noon till whenever the film is fest is finished, probably around 9:30 on Saturday. We'll be playing 2 indie feature films, and we'll have 2 blocks of shorts featuring short indie films, mostly from the Midwest and Wisconsin, but there's some from around the world as well. So Sawdust City Fright Fest, go to sawdustcityfrightfest.com for all the information on that. And once again, we hope you enjoy our first 2 episodes of He's Not Loki. Next week, we will be taking a break from this, but the week after, we will be talking Only Lovers Left Alive. So next week, I may do a program if I can get the folks together on, we'll be covering what we saw and what we liked and didn't like at the Sawdust City Fright Fest. That might happen. It depends on who I can get together for that show. So, a lot of great stuff coming up. Thank you for your support. Don't forget to subscribe and all that bells and whistles and all that. Make sure you check out Ian's stuff and subscribe to all of his stuff as well. And until next time, we'll just say good night there, partners.
Good night. Get up, little doggy.
Giddy up there, doggy. You're cheating hard.